Okay, so closing up an event like this is a thankless task because it's the end of a long day. Those of you like me who traveled, the jet lag is starting to sink in. And those of you who are local, you're thinking about the traffic and how long it's going to take you to get home. So I'm going to keep it very short, not going to keep you for too long. The first thing is just some thanks, I suppose, first of all, to the people who presented. June, Laszlo, Andras, Gabe, Yoshihiro, Ishida, Venki, Rashmin and Bhavesh, and Thomas at the end. So they all volunteered to do this. There was no incentive for them. They spent a lot of time and effort. It takes a lot of work to prepare a presentation like this. Try and anticipate all the questions that you're going to be asked in advance and to come here and present. And then the second thing that stood out for me actually was sometimes events like this, they're very flat. It's people presenting, there isn't much discussion, there isn't much interaction. Thomas got off a bit more lightly maybe because he's at the end of the day, but for everybody else there was a lot of discussion, there were a lot of questions. So it just shows that everybody else who was here, people were interested, they were engaged, they weren't just sitting, like Jim said at the beginning, doing email in the background or killing the time some other way. So I thought that was really good. So one thing in terms of a wrap-up should be some kind of comment on the effectiveness of the summit, the effectiveness of the day. But for that to make any sense, you have to put it into context. So for us, this is a small step in an overall path we've been going down in terms of the open source strategy for DPDK. So I'm just going to recap the path that we're on to get to a proper open source community. So I have the Holy Grail at the end. And the Holy Grail for us at the end is a strong, diverse community. So Thomas showed the figures, and 47% of the commits so far have been by Intel. So we'd like that to be a smaller percentage and to see more contributions from the others. So the path we've been on, we started off back in 2010. I mean, there's lots of work before that, but that was the first official release. And it was always deliberately released under a BSD license. So it was released to specific parties, but it was released under a license which was an open source license. People could use it, modify it, redistribute it, do whatever they want. And we did a number of releases on that model up until the end of 2012, and then we decided to do something different. So we took our latest release at the end of 2012, which was 1.2.3, and we put it up on intel.com. You didn't need to sign in to access it. Anybody could go and get it and download it. We just stuck it up there. There wasn't a lot of fanfare or publicity associated with it. We just wanted to see what would happen with it. And fairly shortly after, our partners in Six Wind established the DPDK.org site. So that was the first real step towards building an open source community. And you've seen the stats in terms of the growth, in terms of the number of contributors, the number of people on the mailing list, things like that. So it's grown very consistently since then. For us internally, the next really big step actually was back in, I should know the date now, but it was ingrained in my mind for a while. Was it June, July, when we released our 1.7 release? And that was our first true open source release. So for a while, we had separate Git repositories internally within Intel and on DPDK.org. And every now and then, we had to merge one into the other to come up with a consolidated release, which was a bit of a tedious process. So 1.7 was the first time we worked from a single Git repository. So instead of doing our development internally and testing it and then shipping it out to the world, we pushed features when they were ready as patches to the mailing list for comment. And it was a bit of a shock to the system for a number of the developers because they worked on a feature for months sometimes. They had it all ready, they pushed it to the mailing list, and they were expecting a pat on the back and congratulations, and that's really good, and I can't wait to use it. But instead what they got is, oh, well, I don't like that bit, and could you change this? And no, I don't like what you've done with the API there at all. So it was an education for some of the developers in terms of what it means to be part of an open source community. We were no longer doing our work completely in isolation. We were having to respond to and react to comments from others on the mailing list. I think long term it leads to a better product. Those of you following the mailing list will see there's a lot of discussion at the moment about how we handle NIC-specific code and whether it should appear in what should be generic code or whether it should be embedded within the PMD. Those kind of discussions are very useful in terms of getting the best product at the end of the day. So it's a bit of a pain for a developer who has to go and do some rework, but the end result is better. And then today we did our first DPDK Summit. So that's, to us, that's all about broadening the scope, trying to further develop the community. And we have a couple of other things then that we're working on. So some of them were mentioned throughout the day, and some of them probably hearing for the first time. So one thing we want to do is some kind of DPDK community conference call. So we haven't quite worked out all the details yet or how that'll work, but the thinking is to get Venki and some of the other key engineers on our side on the phone. We'll make it open so anybody can dial in. We'll probably try and focus the sessions on a particular topic rather than a complete free-for-all. It might be a little bit of presentation, it might be question and answer. We'll have to see how it goes and refine it. So we're looking at doing something maybe every 2 weeks or something like that. We've got to work out the logistics. The sharing collaboration tool that we use internally is Microsoft Lync, which maybe isn't the best in the world for external participants. So we have a few details to work out that we'll do over the next couple of weeks, but we want to try and get that in place. Thomas talked about fixing the release dates. So at the moment, we don't really say in advance when the next release is going to be, but we've been working now to try and work out what the release cadence should be. I want to publish what the dates are going to be about 12 months ahead of time. And then a key thing for us is we want to publicize what we're going to deliver or try to deliver in the next release. So at the moment, you all wait, we finish a release, and then you have a look and see what's in it. It's not the best model. It leads sometimes to duplication. So we have, I think, 3 different VMXNet 3 drivers on dpdk.org now and 3 different Vert.io drivers because various people were working on things at the same time. So once we fix the release dates and publish those, we want to also publish what we're planning to do for the next release. And that would give people an opportunity to comment if there's duplication. Other people might also want to comment on what they plan to do in that time frame so we can put together an overall picture, which would be good. The test framework, I think, is a big thing for us. We've had an internal test framework for the last 3 or 4 years. It works either with a hardware packet generator, we use the Ixia, or it works with Keith's software packet generator, PacketGen. And it's something we use internally for the test cycle at the end of each release. What we're doing right now is just reviewing and tidying up the code, taking away some Intel-specific details and getting it ready to push up to dpdk.org. So we should be able to do that fairly shortly. But it means people can use it if they want to. It means you can review it and improve it. And probably most realistic, you can look at the test coverage and you can add tests as well, which we can then run on subsequent releases. And kind of slightly related to that, the documentation has been a bit of an issue for us for a while because it's been internally, well, we've gone through a few different formats, but it's been either in FrameMaker or in Word, but not in a format which we can maintain on the dpdk.org site and get people to update as they're making contributions. So we're in the process of converting the documentation to RST format, and that should be pushed to the site fairly shortly as well. So it means when other people are submitting patches, they can submit changes to the documentation as well. So hopefully it's a better way to keep the documentation up to date. So that's our kind of path to a full open source community. So then getting back to the question of today, and was it successful, was it not? You have to kind of judge it in the context of that. So for us, it's a step towards that. Looking at the presentations today, they were very diverse, covered a wide range of topics, but there were several common themes which came up throughout. I mean, there's obviously performance, because everything in DPDK is based on performance, but there was also the challenges associated with latency and working in a low latency application. There's obviously a big push in the industry right now towards virtualization and NFV. And there are particular challenges associated with that. Again, performance, and possibly using some direct VM to VM communication like June talked about. There are challenges associated with the vSwitch that a couple of people touched on. And there are challenges associated with live migration across VMs that came up a number of times. So there are a lot of common threads throughout the day. One common thread through the day that I wasn't expecting seemed to be fast cars. So Ericsson even brought one in with them, and Thomas had a few pictures at the end. But I guess it's those kind of common challenges which help to build a community. You need multiple people trying to solve similar problems in order to be able to collaborate on a solution. So the last slide is just next steps, things we'd like to have from you. The first one is feedback on the summit. I think Jim has mentioned this. I don't know how many times I've lost count. But to be able to do these better in future, it really would help to know what worked, what didn't work, what could be better. And perhaps most interestingly of all, where and when we should do these in future. So are there particular times, locations, frequency, anything like that? And then the last thing is obviously community contributions. So others have touched on that a number of times. But you saw the stats and the number of contributions, the number of contributors, the number of discussions on the mailing list going up. We'd obviously like that to be a continuing upward trend. So anybody who's not on the mailing list should be probably more realistic. Any of your colleagues, when you go back to work, who aren't and should be at least monitoring, if not participating there, it would be good to encourage them to do that. And the other thing would be contributions. So there's lots of you doing very good work related to DPDK. So think carefully about, are there aspects of that that you could and would be prepared to push and to upstream to dpdk.org for the benefit of others. And I guess if everybody does that, then the end result is better. So that's the last slide, I think. So thank you all for coming. And we look forward to seeing you all again at the next one of these, wherever and whenever it is. Anything else to say, Jim?
Thank everybody for coming and sticking around. I appreciate it.